Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Kate.
And I'm Stephanie.
And together we're Three Heads. Today we're talking about making text relevant to students. As English teachers, we have limited resources to texts. And so sometimes we need to make something old new again. This is a continuation of a conversation we started on our podcast, Answers May Vary. We will include a link to that in the description box down below.
So what we're going to talk about here is one of our suggestions in our podcast is to use TV shows and movies to help make things more relevant.
Yes.
Choosing the right one can be a little bit tricky, and so through our own...
It seems easy.
Right? It seems like anything would work, but through our own trial and error, we'll give you a few of our disastrous attempts. We thought we'd give you some tips on how to make that work in your classroom.
Yeah, it seems like oftentimes I know I'll be watching a movie or a TV show and I'll be like, oh, this would work for school. And then I don't really think about it again. And then it comes around for us to actually use the episode. And I'm like, oh, I wrote a note down in my phone about this. Let's look at this episode. And then I look at the episode and I'm like, what was I thinking? It's not going to work.
Or you think of a show you've watched a few years ago and you've forgotten some things. And so you're like, oh no, this will be great. And then you watch it and you're like, nah, this won't work at all.
Or it works for you.
Right.
You think it's interesting and engaging
Yes.
and they're like not interested.
Oh, we have a couple good ones on that one. So the first thing is start with what you know. I think it can feel like, oh my gosh, I got to find the right show, or I got to make something relevant, like what students are watching, what's cool now. It's easier to just start with your shows, right? Like, what do you like? What do you watch? What are you familiar with? And often if you can do that, if you're really interested in it, they maybe get exposed to a new show or it works for them as well.
Right, absolutely. It's sort of an extension of you a little bit. You're bringing in something of yourself for them to see. And so that can be sort of interesting. I know I've looked at multiple times episodes of The Simpsons. I never liked The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Sorry, Simpsons lovers.
Me
And so it was just really hard for me. I think I used it once when I was teaching the Raven and it worked just fine. But when I know that it's like a well that lots of people go to, but it's not something that worked for me, or using the Alanis Morissette ironic song to teach irony.
Which I super did my first year because it's what everyone does and it's what the internet says.
And it just doesn't work.
No, because it's not actually ironic. Hot take. With that being said, though, you do have to know the maturity level of your class. So what works with one group of students may or may not work with another. Some students can handle something that has a little bit more bad language, something inappropriate. I know we had a real struggle with this trying to choose a film version of Macbeth. Thank goodness for all of you now there's that new one with, it's Denzel, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Denzel. Yeah. I mean, that one was great, but when we were teaching it, that didn't exist. And so you got all kinds of overly sexualized witches, and it just was a struggle to find one that our sophomores were going to be not completely distracted or confused.
Also think in terms of what your students are going to know. Yes. I know that there was a show that we've used in the past where there was a reference that was like, oh, I don't know if we want to use that. Yeah. But then we thought about it and we were like, are they even going to know what that means? Because the thing is that they know horrendous things that you have no idea about. Yeah. But the things that you're like, oh, I don't know. That's kind of, they don't know.
And it did, right over their heads. You get like the one kid who knows what it is and you're like, shh. So on that note, you have to watch it first just with a view toward like the general of your assignment, toward what it's going to feel like for you to sit in a room with your students and watch this together. Some things it doesn't register to you that it's inappropriate. And then you're watching the episode and you're like, I can't show that in class. That's just, I can't sit in the room with them.
Or it's not inappropriate to you in your everyday life, and it's not inappropriate to them in their everyday life. But there's something about showing it in school that is just kind of like, we've had a couple of those where it was like, I don't have a problem with this,
Yeah.
and I know they watch worse stuff than this, but us just sitting together in a
Uh-huh.
room and
In the
watching
dark.
it, no thank
Yeah.
you.
And on that note, or not on that note, but in addition to that, sometimes an episode just isn't what you remember. So I think we spent I spent a good long time. It was awesome. It was like I got to be productive for school by watching a bunch of TV episodes, but
Yeah.
we needed an episode of a crime show to use with our Julius Caesar project. And we'll talk about the one we replaced in a while. But what we decided to use an episode from Psych, and I love that show. I'm very familiar with it. I had all these ideas of like, oh, the kids would love that one. This one would be really good. But when I went back to watch it, it actually didn't go with what we were doing. Like I hadn't remembered it correctly, or maybe you've blocked out a whole side plot that is super distracting or takes up a lot of time, and really it's more about that than about the part you need.
Yeah.
And
Side plots can be really distracting
yeah,
when you're trying to use a television show or an excerpt from a film. It's like, okay, do they need to understand this sort of like ongoing plot element in order to understand the episode? So it's something that's surprisingly challenging to
and
do.
sometimes you can easily just give them the context, but yeah, sometimes it's like, well, this isn't worth trying to explain.
Yeah.
The last thing, sorry, I was staring at my notes a minute ago because I couldn't read my own handwriting. Sometimes, and Pixar shorts are like really good for this kind of thing. Not so much the ones that are tied to Disney characters, but the ones that are just general. The one problem with those though is sometimes those are too simple, or because they don't have dialogue in them, it can be a challenge to make it work. Like if you're trying to introduce theme or something like that. And so again, like you might in your head be like, oh, Paperman, that one's so cute. But then you go to watch it and you're like, wait, there's no words. What are they going to do? And so I think if you just have to kind of in general, is what you're watching what you remembered? Are you going to feel good about sitting in a class with students watching it?
Yeah. Or in the case of Pixar shorts, sometimes I know sometimes I'm like, I don't think I know what that really
I've had that
means.
too.
And there are definitely some where it's like, oh, you could interpret this in multiple ways, and those are great to use. But when you're like, I don't really know myself.
Which like secret confessions on the internet. I mean, that happens with poems too. Sometimes I'm like, nope, I don't know what it means. We'll skip that one.
Let me find something I do know. Might take me a while to find it.
Now, probably if you find one, you've gone through this kind of vetting process and you're like, okay, usually what would happen is I'd narrow it down to 2 or 3 and send them to Kate, and she'd be like, okay, I think this one, that one, whatever it is. Then you're going to want to watch it again with your actual assignment in mind, whether you've created it. So it was great when we were replacing an episode, because then I had the assignment and I could just try to do it as I watched. But you want to kind of have an idea of what your assignment's going to look like as you're watching it, so you can make sure that like it's doable. So you want to make sure that what you're going to ask students to do can be done with that episode. Or are there maybe some clarifying questions you'll need to provide? I know that what we did when we replaced the psych episode is we went through and said, oh, by the way, we mean this. And so it just kind of is a way to make sure that like it is a completable assignment, especially if this is not intended to be like a major assignment. You don't want it to be so hard that they're like, which part of the movie are they talking about? I don't know.
The text shouldn't be the obstacle
Yes.
in the assignment. So it's sort of a layered process of like, is this show going to work? Could this episode particularly work? Am I going to be able to sit in a room and not have my head like this? Is it going to work for my assignment? Ultimately, you want to keep it simple.
Yes.
It's about the assignment. It's not about the episode. If it's about the episode, then you're showing your film or your whatever it is for a different reason. But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about, how am I taking this text that is really not accessible to students, and I'm trying to supplement it with things that they are going to be engaged in or they are going to find accessible. So it's really about this assignment. If it's about the the text, then that doesn't apply
Yeah.
here.
And that's where we have our best examples of trial and error, because you also think, oh no, this is good and it's going to work, and then you do it with students. So we had for the crime report that we replaced, we had an episode of elementary, and it was great. Like, it worked with the assignment really well. It was
perfectly.
interesting. Probably actually aligned with the assignment better than the psych one
Yeah.
did. But the problem was that the crime was this really complicated, like, biology thing where they were like taking a biopsy of the victim's own tissue and then like re-injecting it into him in a way that made it a poison. And our students were lost. Like, they struggle, I mean, with their own biology class, and it was becoming an obstacle to them in completing the task. And so we were like, okay, we're going to find the simplest crime we can find, the most straightforward one. We also, sometimes you think you've got it as easy as you can. We did a theme activity with our students where we had them watch Up, which you're thinking Disney, this is going to work great. And it was disastrous. Even that was too complex for them in terms of coming up with a theme that was not adventure is out there.
Not a cliche.
Yeah. And so we ended up replacing it with the Lego Batman movie, which is just very, like, it's very obvious what the theme is. It's very clear what you're supposed to take away. And it made for a better assignment because, again, our purpose was not to teach up. It was to teach them how to write a theme paragraph. And so it worked a lot better when we kept it simple.
Yeah. Take out the nuance and ambiguity.
Yeah. Because even Lego Batman, which we thought was hilarious and is made for children, they just watch it like an action movie. They were laughing.
Hopefully you have some ideas kicking around in your mind about shows that you watch that could apply to a text that you're teaching, or a movie that you can adapt, or not adapt the movie, a movie that you can use to adapt a text that you're teaching and make it more accessible to your students. If you have something that you already use and you think it works fantastically, please share it with us in the comments down below. See you soon.
Bye.